You're listening to Therapy Plus, a mental health podcast.
The views and opinions expressed by the guest speaker on this episode are solely those of the guest. The content shared is intended for informational purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice or endorsement.
Hello, I am Jodi Cohen, and I'm so excited to share the healing power of smell with you and how to regulate your nervous system and your emotions really quickly. What we're going to cover is how your sense of smell can be strategically used to help regulate your nervous system, enhance your cognitive function, meaning your ability to remember, recall, think quickly, dot connect, support any difficult situations, where you're struggling with compliance, and accelerate your emotional processing for trauma release. So, one of the things that I really understand about the body and how it heals is that when you are in a state of stress, your ability to heal is compromised. And the main reason for that is because your body prioritizes survival. So if it perceives that it's in danger, either physical danger, there's a car that's about to hit you, or emotional danger, you turn on the television and see something scary on the news, like all these school shootings, I often think, oh God, I hope that doesn't happen to anyone I know and love. It's horrible. Or even emotional memory, where you think about something bad that happened and all of a sudden your body is primed for survival. All of these sources of stress teach you to prioritize survival, which means that the sympathetic fight or flight branch of your nervous system is more active, and blood is routed towards your arms and your limbs so that you can either fight back, flee, or sometimes freeze and play dead and survive. And what that means is that all of the healing processes that require safety, or the parasympathetic branch of your nervous system, get shut down. So if you are in stress, you are not able to heal. And the challenge with that is that most people can recognize they're in stress, but they don't necessarily know how to get out of it. This was me for years. I would try to do everything right. I would eat all the right foods. I would avoid all the wrong foods. I would do yoga. I would take the dogs on walk, and then invariably witching hour, right as I'm making dinner, like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, the baby would be crying, the dog would be barking, the dinner would be burning, my mother-in-law would invariably call and need something, and then my husband would come home and require my attention. And no matter how regulated I would try to be, I would just get completely flooded. And the only thing that really helped me was smell. I would start to train myself to smell an oil I'm going to talk about, and that would help me shift out of that survival phase into rest and digest. And this is the main reason, this is my main why. This idea that smell is the most powerful of our 5 senses and the most underutilized, and really helping people understand how we can use smell to kind of shift us out of stress, and then how shifting us out of stress shifts us into healing. So that's really the main point I want to cover today. And the other thing that's going on that smell is really great for, think about any of your devices, your laptop, your phone. We all have these unopened tabs, right? Which means that there are programs running in the background which are draining our batteries. So when these stuck emotions run in the background, perhaps it's a memory of a fight you had with somebody, or maybe there was some traumatic experience that, if they're unprocessed, as long as these tabs are open, it's keeping us in that sympathetic state of the nervous system, because it's your emotions that really drive your physiological reactions. It's designed to be emotions are energy in motion, and that energy is supposed to prompt and organize you for action. It's a warning system to alert you of danger. It provides important information about what's going on, and it motivates you. Like there's a reason, righteous rage, anger, or we're so angry, we're not going to take it anymore. So we actually are moved to action. And it also helps in communication with others. So emotions drive stress and the autonomic nervous system. Again, this forces all of the healing to kind of take a back seat. Literally, your blood is routed away from your core where digestion and detoxification occurs to your arms and your limbs. So emotions drive this maladaptive stress response. And also, there are a couple systems that are activated when there's stress, right? Your nervous system is activated, your limbic system is activated, and your endocrine system is activated. So the limbic system is kind of where the memory is stored. In order to ensure survival, you need to remember what's dangerous. So this is another area where smell is really important because of the five senses, smell goes directly to the limbic system. And this is because you need to smell water, right? You smell food, you smell predator odor, you smell fire. Smell helps you, follow your nose towards what will keep you alive and also prevent anything dangerous from happening. And what can happen with chronic stress is that your amygdala sees everything as a threat. A great example of this is you might be on a hike, you look down and you perceive a snake. That's your amygdala saying danger, danger. And then another part of your brain that we're going to talk about, the prefrontal cortex, your forehead, which controls your executive function, checks in and determines, no, that's not a snake, that's a stick. And so you don't need to react to everything. But it's emotions that can kind of drive this limbic response. They also drive the endocrine system. Emotions like fear, anger, grief, sadness, they all trigger the release of stress hormones like cortisol, which prepare the body for fight and flight. And as we talked about, stress turns off healing. It's digestion that gets turned off. Immunity, kind of adrenal function, meaning not just the go, go, go caffeinated hyperadrenal mode, but being able to repair and recover. Your heart health gets challenged, your brain health, your ability to detoxify and calm inflammation. So I'm going to talk about different systems that I think work in conjunction to help with this healing. One of the things that I discovered early, the fight or flight nervous system is regulated by your vagus nerve. And back in 2012, when I started talking about this, people really hadn't heard of the vagus nerve. They were like, you mean like Las Vegas? I'm like, no, not that Vegas. But it's now become pretty popular. Everyone's talking about your nervous system and regulating your nervous system. And what I've realized is that the nervous system is part of the terrain, right? It's not just your nervous system. It's everything in your neck that surrounds this, other systems that work together. And so what I've come to realize and learned from personal experience is that activating your nervous system, your vagus nerve, to activate your parasympathetic healing nervous system is important, but it's not enough. And if you're not paying attention to the other cofactors in this situation, you are not going to heal. It's a little bit like I lived in New York for a decade, and I had several locks on my door because, I got burglarized a couple times. And so let's say that I'm trying to open the door and I only open two of the locks and the other ones are still bolted. That door isn't going to open. Similarly, if you're trying to help your body regulate and you're only focused on stimulating your vagus nerve, it's not going to return you to balance. It's almost like a Band-Aid that helps in the moment, but then, you have to keep applying that Band-Aid. Like a lot of pharmaceutical drugs, right? They work, but they don't fix the underlying root problem. So to address the underlying root problem of stress, it's important to look at your parasympathetic nervous system, your limbic system, your endocrine system and your hypothalamus, your heart and heart coherence, and your fascia and lymphatic system. And you need to address all five of these factors to allow the safe space to transmute emotions. So Smell. I told you we'd get into smell and essential oils. Smell signals safety and helps regulate emotions. As I mentioned, smell is the most important and the most underutilized of your five senses. And you know what's fabulous? We all have this technology, all of these biohacking tools. Some of them are expensive, some of them you need to charge. What's wonderful is that your nose goes with you. You literally carry it on your face. It doesn't require any additional expense, no charging necessary. And what people don't really realize is that nose cells are actually brain cells. It is the area where the brain is the most exposed to the environment. And smell links directly to the emotional part of your brain, to the amygdala, whereas the other five senses have a less direct route. They have to go through the thalamus first. Smell also goes directly up to your forehead, the prefrontal cortex. And that's important because most people don't realize that loss of smell is the first sign of cognitive decline. And I believe because loss of smell is indicative of loss of executive function. The prefrontal cortex isn't getting used, use it or lose it. And so it's not working as well. And that's why you see some of these symptoms of cognitive decline, like forgetfulness, rage, because you don't have emotional regulation. Just the simple act of smelling helps to stimulate that part of the brain and helps to improve cognitive function and actually decrease depression. So here's a graphic that I really like. This was in my second book, Essential Oils to Boost the Brain and Heal the Body. It just shows how your sense of smell, the olfactory system, is literally located right next to your limbic system. And this allows you to kind of mobilize, release, and process emotions. Here's a more detailed pathway that, when you smell things, it links to certain olfactory receptors. Certain olfactory receptors are actually programmed to detect predator odor. There is a Nobel Prize winning author named Linda Buck, who's located in Seattle, and she was researching olfactory receptors for predator odor. And then she took it one step further and she was like, I wonder if anything cancels this out. And it turns out it's the smell of rose. Roses or rose essential oil helps to turn off that fear signal. It's actually a safety signaling scent. So I just want to give context for oils are the concentrated essence of plants. You go into the lavender field, you pick the lavender, it's very farm to table at its ripest. And then just as you would ferment cabbage or basically can ripe fruit, you then put it in a big vat. You don't fill it with water because that would damage the plants. You boil the water elsewhere and you steam distill. You put the steam through the lavender and that helps to lift the oil off of the plant in the most gentle, delicate way. And then you take that steam and you cool it elsewhere. And we know that oil and water don't mix. So the oil is the essential oil and the water with the imprint of the plant is called the hydrosol and they separate. And so oils are the deeply concentrated essence of plants. But what's amazing about them is that they obviously can be topically applied to the skin, but they can also be smelled. Essential oils take advantage of this amazing pathway that other remedies cannot, because most of us have some kind of gut inflammation. And so if the gut is compromised, smell is a really good way to get things into the body. And smell is really the fast pass to your brain. And your brain is the top-down system that controls your hormones, influences your emotions, and your mood. And so I feel like if we're not taking advantage of our sense of smell, we're really missing a critical pathway for healing. The other thing that we don't really talk about, the biggest challenge I think in healing today is getting the right remedy into the right area of the brain. But the brain is hard to access because it's got this security system known as your blood-brain barrier that doesn't let very many things through, in part because it's only super small fat-soluble molecules that can access the brain through the blood-brain barrier. And what's interesting is that the blood-brain barrier is actually thinner in the olfactory passageways. So that is a great way to access the brain very quickly. And, it's interesting when we inhale, there are two ways that things are kind of getting into our system. One is that they're literally going through the nasal passageways directly into the brain. The other way is that they're getting absorbed into the bloodstream and then going systemically through the blood supply. So I really want to kind of land on this idea that smell is a safety signal. There's a lot of information out that needs to be put out about trauma, about how trauma, if you think of the dominoes, trauma is this loop. It's a repeat memory recall that's constantly putting us in the fight or flight system so that we're never feeling safe enough to heal. And so there are a lot of somatic practices that help get you into your body that are incredibly valuable. Smell is just an easy one. I often talk about the supplement graveyard, right? The supplements that we keep in our closet and we forget to ingest, they're not really going to help us. A little bit like the ambulance that's stuck in traffic. If it can't actually make it to the site of the accident, it's probably not going to save lives. So we need to find things that we're actually able to do. And smell is pretty easy. You can carry a little bottle of essential oils in your pocket. When I used to carpool, a friend taught me this trick. I'd pick up my kids at soccer, my 12-year-old boy, and the car would smell like a locker room. And so she said, always keep a bag of tangerines in your car. And then when you pick up the kids, give them all a tangerine because they're hungry. And then your car smells like tangerines because the oil from citrus fruits are in the peel. So when they peel them, it makes your car smell great. But I always loved that, because it just kind of cleans the air and sets that smell of safety. So it doesn't need to be oils. It can be fruit. You can smell your coffee. I live in the Pacific Northwest where there are a lot of ferns and pines. They're beautiful smells. Just really stop and kind of take in the smell. They talk about forest bathing. That's what it is. It's this idea that there are the smell of nature. So what is a safety signal? Your amygdala, we talked about, coordinates your mental and behavioral response to threats. And it monitors the incoming signals from your five senses and also your internal environment, like the signals from your heart, the signals from your fascia. And if there's a mismatch, it's looking for familiar. Familiar is safe, right? This is why sometimes we get stuck in these kind of toxic loops. If we had a certain kind of parent that maybe didn't have the best behavior, we often marry someone who's similar because it feels familiar. And so therefore we equate familiarity with safety, but that's exactly what the amygdala is looking for. It's looking for familiarity. And if there's a mismatch, it perceives danger, and it can often be kind of maladapted and hypervigilant in terms of its perception of danger. And so what we want to do is use smell as a pattern interrupt, because this is like pressing pause. The amygdala is taking in information. We override that information with a smell that can be a safety smell. And this allows the amygdala to calm down and not send those danger signals. It's a pattern interrupt. And it helps to also shift your attention to the prefrontal cortex, because when we smell, we're fast passed to the brain, literally to the forehead. So it shifts the energy and the focus from the part of your brain that's yelling danger, danger, to the part of your brain that is the checks and balance and saying, no, that is not a snake, it's a stick, you're safe. So smell can also stop a panic attack. This is one of my favorite hacks. I used to get claustrophobic and overwhelmed, like in the elevator, the tight space. But interestingly, this would even happen at Trader Joe's, the supermarket that's kind of notorious for the small parking spots and the small aisles. My kids loved their stuff, so I'd go there and fill the cart with everything they wanted for their lunch boxes and for breakfast and for dinner. And I'd get in this crazy long line. And the line wouldn't move, but my heart would start racing. I'd feel really hot. I'd just completely have a panic attack. And sadly, there were times when I'd have to just abandon my cart because I couldn't keep it together and stay there. And then a friend of mine, a functional neurologist named Titus Chu, told me that panic attacks are your right frontal lobe, your right forehead, overactivating. And so the easiest way to deal with this is to stimulate The left frontal lobe, literally plug your right nostril, inhale through your left nostril. The left nostril goes directly to the left forehead. That stimulates and activates that part of the brain, balances the two hemispheres, and suddenly you're not having a panic attack anymore. And what's amazing about this is it doesn't just work in the moment. It's not just a Band-Aid that, oh, okay, I know to bring my oil with me, which I do still, in case I have that Trader Joe's panic attack, but it's also preventative because now I don't have panic attacks anymore because I think I've, weightlifted my prefrontal cortex enough that it's now regulated and in balance. I mentioned that there is a ton of research that smells tied to cognitive function. Impaired sense of smell is the earliest and the most common symptom of cognitive decline. And it's believed that it's that loss of olfactory stimulation that causes the brain's memory cells to deteriorate. So inhaling oil, it's good to do variety too, because you maybe get used to, it's a little bit like if you're going to the gym and maybe you lift 15 pounds. At a certain point, 15 pounds becomes easy, right? So you have to maybe go up to 18 or 20 or even 25 pounds. You just keep challenging yourself, and you can do that by rotating different scents. Or I sell essential oils and I like them as blends because when you have blends, you do have a variety, which I think is more effective. And the olfactory system is the only sensory system with direct projections into the limbic system, which is also great for regulating emotion. Smell also helps regulate the nervous system. There's a ton of research on this, how aromatherapy increases parasympathetic nervous system activity, and certain smells like rose, geranium. It's usually the flowers that are known for their stress suppressing effect, lavender. Aromatherapy seems to drive the automatic nervous system activity toward a more balanced state. I share a ton of research on this in my book, Essential Oils to Boost the Brain and Heal the Body. But I'm really excited about this. We talked about how the brain is challenging to access and the blood-brain barrier is challenging to access. I think it's really interesting that we talk about certain foods as brain superfoods, like omega-3 fatty acids. It's because they are the right size and shape to cross the blood-brain barrier. So again, they can get in. And essential oils are fat soluble. Most of us recognize that the brain is primarily made of fat. Fat likes fat. This is one reason oil pulling, you're swishing coconut oil around in your mouth, and a lot of the microbes that are in your mouth are in fat. And so it almost like a vacuum kind of pulls them out. Is another reason that liposomal remedies are easily absorbed because the brain is fat, fat likes fat, essential oils are fat soluble, and volatile compounds that can easily cross the blood-brain barrier. They're also easy for the skin. And so once they cross the blood-brain barrier, they're lipid soluble, and so they rapidly absorb and interact with the receptors in your nervous system. So one of the blends that we have found to be the most effective for stress reduction is what we call parasympathetic. And the gear shift between your fight or flight, there is danger detection nervous system, the sympathetic branch, and your rest and digest safety branch is your vagus nerve. It's cranial nerve number 10, longest nerve in the body that most people have never heard of. It literally is the gut-brain connection. So it starts at the very base of the skull, the back of your neck, and then splits and winds around both sides of the neck behind the earlobe. That's where it is the most accessible to the surface. And there's tons of research. There's actually a device, a surgically implanted vagus nerve stimulation device that stimulates the vagus nerve. If you feel with me, right behind the earlobe, you're going to feel a divot. A lot of the reflex points have divots, which makes them easier to find. That is where your vagus nerve is the most accessible and the thickest. And so you can use a topical remedy like our essential oil blend of parasympathetic, which is clove, which is super stimulatory and very high in this healing constituent eugenol, and lime, which has very light molecules. So basically, the beauty of blends is that when you combine clove, which is stimulatory, and lime, which has really small molecules, is you get a fast-acting remedy, a blend that's stimulatory with super small molecules. So stimulatory and fast-acting. And so you just put a tiny amount on that little divot behind the earlobe on the mastoid bone. That in turn activates your parasympathetic nervous system and turns on healing. So you're going to apply it right there, just a tiny drop. You can also smell it because, as I mentioned, smell becomes a safety cue. So your body starts to have that memory where it knows when it smells that oil. You usually topically apply it, but it gets to the point where it's a bit Pavlovian. It smells that oil and it knows, oh, yes, this is my signal to relax. And you can also, if you're feeling a big wave of emotions, I am the queen of anxiety. I've had a lot of unnecessary grief. I can definitely speak to this when you're kind of having a wave of that big feeling. And sometimes it's like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do anything, but like maybe just crawl up in a ball and spend the day that way. Just stimulating your vagus nerve with essential oils can really help you shift out of that. It helps you shift out of danger. And the other thing that's interesting that I hadn't really realized until I personally experienced it, sometimes when you're perceiving fight or flight, all resources are allocated to survival. And that means you kind of get tunnel vision in your critical thinking, right? That's often when someone presents terrifying outcome to you. You have to do this, and you're listening to this and you're so shut down that you can't even think. I had a messy situation where someone was telling me that this worst case scenario was going to happen and that I needed to make a decision right then. And I was so overwhelmed that I actually hung up on this person. But I'm so glad I did, because once I hung up, I was like, wow, I'm really in fight or flight. Let me kind of activate my parasympathetic nervous system, and I'll come back to this. And once I did, I realized I don't actually think what this person was saying was true. There's absolutely no reason I need to do something today. I can get a second opinion. I'm sure there are more options. And so it allows you to problem solve when you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, because suddenly, you're not in that fight or flight tunnel vision. My only options are to fight back or flee. You can recognize wow, there are a lot more things going on here. But, if you were in that incredibly dangerous situation, pondering the state of the universe probably would not be beneficial to your survival. So you can see why it shuts down. The other system that comes into play when you're having a stress response, so your endocrine system, your hypothalamus is the master controller of your endocrine system, and it's what sends signals to the other endocrine organs like your adrenal glands and your thyroid to increase your energy so that you have that energy to fight back or flee. So basically, your hypothalamus sends a signal to your pituitary gland, which then sends a signal to your adrenal gland to release cortisol. But what happens, wear and tear, if your body is constantly experiencing stress, at a certain point, your hypothalamus maybe gets a little fuzzy in terms of sending and receiving messages, like it's telling your adrenals to pump out cortisol 24/7. So it gets to the point where, there's enough cortisol in the system, but your hypothalamus isn't necessarily getting those clear messages. So this is where essential oils can really help reset the thermostat, so to speak. It just helps the hypothalamus gauge things optimally. And so we teach people to topically apply our hypothalamus blend right above the third eye on the forehead. And it's really interesting because when we test people nutritionally, sometimes they're what we call switched, which means that they should react one way, but they're it's usually when the hypothalamus is not necessarily getting the right messages, so it can't send the right messages. Think of that old game of telephone. Someone whispers orange in your ear, but somehow you don't hear it. So you hear arrange, right? Which sounds kind of similar, but totally different meaning. And then you say arrange to the next person and maybe they hear that differently. And so the signal gets messed up. So the response gets messed up. So this is a really good way to kind of reboot your endocrine system, return to factory settings, so to speak. And when you do that in combination with activating your parasympathetic nervous system, it's again like opening all 5 locks at once. And then resetting your limbic system. And this is where I really love smell, because your sense of smell is the easiest way to reset your limbic system, especially certain essential oils. Most people don't realize that all of our pharmaceutical drugs were originally derived from plants, right? White willow bark is now aspirin. Valerian root is now Valium. And all of these oils, we know that they have healing constituents. We recognize it. Like, we know that ginger, if you're feeling a little nauseous or motion sick, ginger can help that, right? Peppermint can help with an upset stomach. We know this to be true, and oils are just the concentrated essences of those herbs. And in part, it's because they have these medicinal properties, right? They're antimicrobial, antibacterial, antifungal, soothing, relaxing. Some of them have expectorant properties, and a lot of them help with fluid flow. They have vasodilation properties, which means that they make the blood vessels slightly bigger, so there's more space for things to move more quickly. This blend has a lot of these actually really expensive oils. That's one reason that I like to do blends, because sometimes people, oh, helichrysum is so expensive, sandalwood's so expensive, like they can't afford it. And so I do the raw ingredients for them so that they're able to afford it. But these particular blends are known for this constituent called sesquiterpene, which is really great for helping to regulate the limbic system. And I teach people to either inhale the limbic reset or apply it on the forehead. These points are kind of known as emotional points. It's interesting, often when we have a headache or something feels overwhelming, we naturally put our hand on our forehead, and that's causing heat and blood flow to go to the forehead. We're naturally inclined to rebalance ourselves, even if we don't remember or consciously recognize that's what we're doing. And so topically applying oil on this area can be a really nice rebalancing point. Other points that you can do it are the top of the head and just the back of the head. Those are really good reset points for the limbic system. One of the other things we kind of talked about how accessing the brain is really tricky. And a lot of times we want to hit the body from the top down. So make sure that the signals that go from the brain to the body are balanced and appropriate so that we regulate the stress response. But there is bidirectional communication from the brain to the body, and then also from the body to the brain. And there are two specific communication systems that I want to touch on, because I realize that they definitely play a role in our ability to regulate stress, and that is the heart and the fascia. So there's this idea of heart coherence. There's a wonderful institute called HeartMath, and they've done so much amazing research. And what they found is that the heart sends more signals to the brain than the brain sends to the body. And these heart signals can either be kind of erratic, stressful, which throws the brain into an erratic state, or they can be coherent. This is one of the reasons that like gratitude practices and forgiveness practices are so amazing, because just going into a state of gratitude, it's almost like the heart can't multitask, right? You can't be grateful and grumpy at the same time. And so when you start going into that gratitude state, it automatically puts your heart into coherence. There are also certain flowers and oils like jasmine, rose, all of those beautiful flowers that put you into coherence. And so we have a blend that we call heart that helps you step into heart coherence, because coherence informs the brain the trauma is over. It basically tells you that the body is safe. And Roland McCready of the HeartMath Institute likes to say that, you can't think your way out of incoherence, that you actually need to put your body into this state of coherence, your heart. And, gratitude's a great way. He actually has several books on all these amazing strategies for heart coherence. But again, sometimes when you're overwhelmed, everything is too much. And so smell is a really great way to put your body into coherence. And one of the reasons that I believe, actually all natural remedies, but smell in particular, really works is this idea of entrainment. And, you can think of it like if you look and see birds, they're entrained, they fly together, right? You're at a live event, a concert, a sporting event, people start to clap, and the clapping winds up having this kind of coherence resonance. But the idea is this: when two people are together, your husband comes home and he's had a bad day and he's grumpy and you're in a really happy mood. So one of two things is going to happen. Either he's going to like bring you down and you're going to be like, or you're going to lift him up, right? You're going to entrain. And ideally, it's kind of the stronger energy that brings the other one up. This is the principle why crystals work, or why forest bathing, why walking in nature, because you entrain in the frequency of nature and that lifts you up. The same principle is at play with essential oils because they're the concentrated essence of nature. Don't get me wrong. If you're able to walk outside barefoot in the sunshine, always, always do that. But there are times, I live in Seattle, it's raining most of the time. You can't necessarily go outside. And so it's nice to bring outside in. This is one reason I think frozen vegetables are great in the winter. Like, they're still vegetables, so oils allow for the principle of entrainment. And that is one way that they work to get us into balance, and especially the heart. And this is why I believe topical application of a high vibration essential oil can help raise the frequency of low vibration emotions. So your heart pattern reflects emotions. And we know this, in my period of intense grief, I had this, it was like a Charlie horse of the heart. I've never felt pain like that before. It was so physically intense. And because the grief was so strong, it literally gave me a broken heart. Pro tip, this is where I really learned how powerful rose essential oil can be for grief. Anytime a friend loses someone, I send them a bottle of rose essential oil. And then we also have a blend called Lung Support. That's really amazing for grief. It's got a lot of flower remedies in it, but just topically applying that frequency, that high vibration energy over the heart helps the heart entrain and kind of get a little uplifted so that it's more in balance. And then that signal is sent to the brain that you're in balance, that heart coherence. So our heart blend integrates and balances your physical, emotional, and mental body through your heart. Obviously, when you're having a great day, like being in love, you have all these amazing emotions of gratitude and compassion, and you can even create forgiveness for yourself. But some days are harder. And so it's nice to have an essential oil that you can entrain with that lifts you up. And so our blend is heart. And it helps activate heart coherence by energetically aligning your heart into coherence to help you focus on positive, peaceful, loving, and harmonious thoughts and emotion. Your heart actually plays host to 40,000 sensory neurons through which it communicates to the brain and the body, producing and releasing hormones into the bloodstream. A lot of them are like the happy hormones, the serotonin. And this blend was really designed to harmonize these chemicals and electrical signals and help support that optimal state of heart coherence that allows you to detoxify and transmute intense emotions. And you can smell it. You can apply a couple drops over the heart. There's also a great reflex point for the heart on the wrists. Dr. Elisa Song, who is a pediatrician who works with a lot of kids, she loves helping kids do that. And it's great too because, you're in class and maybe you're going through whatever you're going through. Just putting that oil on the wrist and gently smelling through class, it really helps uplift you. My other obsession at the moment is fascia, which is technically the structure and the saran wrap that surrounds us, but it's so much more than that. The fascia holds on to all of the trauma and it weaves throughout the body. But if you think about it, if we're in that fetal protective brace for impact position, we're protecting our heart. Our shoulders are kind of hunched around our heart. And so I was working on shifting my vagus nerve into parasympathetic more often, but it turned out the tight fascia around my neck and my back was squeezing on it almost like it was an adhesion. It was keeping me stuck in that fight or flight. And so the more I helped to unpack my fascia, this was actually, to my knowledge, we are the only topically applied remedy to support fascia. Red light works. My friend Deanna Hansen has this great company called Block Therapy that works. There are many things that you can do, but just a topical remedy, to my knowledge, we're the only ones that have that. And it's funny, a representative from a big essential oil company we were at a conference with them and she came up to the booth and she was like, God, I really thought you guys were going to be horrible, but you're pretty great. And the one thing that she said that I thought was so interesting The fascia blend contains angelica oil, which is amazing and hard to get. And she basically revealed that these bigger companies can't get those kinds of oils because there's just not enough quantity. So I think even if you already love oils and you're working with your favorite company, keep them. But you might just consider looking at our fascia release blend because it really addresses the fascial system from both an emotional and a physical standpoint. It helps to it helps with fluid movement. Like Deanna Hansen really talks about fluid isometrics. We're mostly water. And so the more we can help the fluid flow so that the good things get in and the bad things get out, the more we just help our cells oxygenate and heal. And so fascial constriction constricts emotional release and actually physical release. I love Emoto. He was this amazing researcher with water, and he took photos of water, basically like either when certain music was playing or under certain words. And what he found is that the water really carries the resonance, the frequency of the emotions. And when he would play rock music or he would put negative words, the coherence of the water was very dysregulated. And so the idea is this, that if we're mostly water and the water has a memory of whatever thought, feeling, or emotion we have, the more happy, high vibration emotions we have, or the more we entrain with nature and things that are in balance and help us regulate, the more the fluid in our body and the fascia can heal and be coherent. So this is the fascia release blend. It's designed to help unwind your fascia and emotionally signal your body that you're safe and physically remove restrictions and physical tension in your muscles and connective tissue, which can be a protective layer or armoring. And all you do is topically apply it. I'm a yoga girl. I do yoga most days. And it's fascinating because my tight spots are my hips and my back. So any kind of hip opening or heart opening, slightly ouchy. So I'll bring it into class. We have a roller bottle, which you can roll on under your yoga clothes. And I'll notice, like I'll be trying to do cactus pose or heart open, and suddenly I'll apply it. And it just helps me release so much more. It's amazing. And then the final piece of the puzzle is the lymphatics. The lymphatics are really the sewer system of the body. They help move the waste, move all the water. And they really don't have a pump, which means that if it's congested, there's fluid that backs up, which means that you have swelling, but also, the toxins sit too long, the good things don't get in, the bad things don't get out. And there really is a deep interplay between your fascial system, your lymphatic system, and your vagus nerve, especially around the neck. My dear friend, Dr. Christine Schaffner, who treats the most chronically ill of the chronically ill, was noticing that like 99% of her clients had what she calls vagus nerve toxicity. It's what Tufts researcher Michael Van Ecklinger calls vagus nerve infection hypothesis. And it's this idea that surrounding your vagus nerve is the lymph. And if the lymph is congested, it's pressing into the vagus nerve, so the vagus nerve can't signal. If you've ever been in the middle seat of an airplane between two linebackers, like that happened to me one time. I couldn't even move my elbows to like turn the pages of my book. You're just so compressed. You can't do anything. And so your vagus nerve needs space. And what's really interesting is that essential oils can be used to help with lymph flow, to help kind of vasodilate and support lymphatic flow and tissue fluid circulation, because essential oil compounds move fluids and energy in plants. They help transport the water from the roots to the leaves, and they perform similar functions in your body, helping you move energy, flush toxins, open drainage channels, and especially mint. Like if anyone's had a lymph massage, they often offer you spearmint or peppermint. There is a lot of research that this helps move lymph. It's a big component in our lymph blend. Also, what's interesting is that the lymph is super close to the surface in the skin, and 100% of your lymph drains through your clavicles right under your collarbone. And that's a big point where it can get congested. So just even topically applying the lymph blend there helps to move stagnant lymph fluid. I like to put it on the collarbone, the clavicles, and down the sides of the neck, the armpits, around the gut, kind of those hip creases, and then the back of the knee, just to really help lymph flow, especially through those congested spots. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to us at info@Vibrant Blue Oils for more information. We're happy to share more about our products and how you can use them to support your nervous system and emotional regulation. I really enjoyed this time, and I hope you did too. Thank you so much.